Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the September 12th meeting of the Milton Conservation Commission. Commission members are appointed by the Select Board to implement the rules and regulations of the State Wetlands Protection Act and the Milton Town bylaw governing the wetlands. As a matter, we've got two matters of formality. One, we introduce ourselves in a moment. And secondly, we invite everyone to speak, but we do ask that you introduce yourself for the record, and we are being recorded. That's part of the open meeting law. My name is John Kiernan. Steve, can you go?
Steve Ibis, Conservation Agent.
Tom?
Tom Palmer, member.
Philip?
Philip Driscoll, Conservation Clerk.
Wendy?
Good evening. I'm Wendy Garpa, one of the commissioners.
And Ingrid?
Ingrid Beatty, Commissioner.
All right. I did hear from Todd. He's not available this evening, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure about Hans, but we've got our quorum. And Arthur, as we've just been discussing, is on the high seas and somewhere off of Newfoundland. So we're ready to go. First, I should start by saying that we will continue for the benefit of the public. Items on the agenda 9 and 10. That's a request of the applicant. Those have been continued until the October meeting. 9 is 1259 Brush Hill Road, Lot C, and 10 is 1259 Brush Hill Road, Lot D. Those will be continued. So we go right to number 1, request for determination of applicability at Turner's Pond. Deborah Felton, do you wish to begin?
Actually, John, I'm going to turn this over to Phil Matthews, who's the treasurer of Milton Fuller Housing Corporation. So Phil's on, and he'll do the presentation.
Great, welcome, Phil.
Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
All right, great. I'm Phil Matthews. I'm the Fuller Village Board member and the treasurer of the nonprofit corporation. Deborah is also here. Deborah is the former longtime executive director, recently retired of Fuller Village, and she's done most of the legwork on this project up until this point. We're here tonight to urge you to approve, after review, the planned placement of a granite bench at Turner's Pond, honoring Marvin Gordon. Marvin served for many years in public office in town. He was a member and a chair of the Warrant Committee, the School Committee, and the Select Board, and he served for many decades as a town meeting member. But Fuller wants to honor Marvin for being the visionary and the driving force behind the creation of Fuller Village and serving as its founding president for over 20 years. Over the years, hundreds of Milton seniors have been able to live in a senior community in their own town near family and friends. Not only has Fuller been a benefit to the residents, but it's also been an asset to the town, including being the town's largest Milton-based taxpayer. Fuller today is a financially secure, operationally sound, and vibrant community for both Milton seniors and seniors from surrounding communities. Both Marvin and the board have considered Fuller Village to be a perpetual organization, and we plan and work towards that goal every day. We believe honoring Marvin with granite bench in an area of high resident traffic, where many will see it over many decades, is a fitting tribute to Marvin and the senior community that he created. We thank you very much for your consideration.
Well, Philip, thank you. And you're preaching to the choir, because we all are familiar with Marvin Gordon, his achievements, his accomplishments, his commitment to the town. And above all, Marvin Gordon was a gentleman. And it's our honor to honor him and to join with you in approving this bench. Do you have a location in mind as to where the bench will be placed?
I think it's indicated on the application,
Yeah, it is. I think there's a mark on the map, but it's as I understand it, if I'm reading the map correctly, it is on the side of the pond closest to Brook Road. Is that correct?
Yes. South side.
Okay. So it would be near to, but not next to the John Cronin bench. Is that correct?
Yes,
All right. Perfect location. And I also see in the application that there's a rendering of where the stone will be placed. Is that like Photoshop there, or is that actually the location that it's going to be in?
it's photoshopped.
Okay. Well, it looks
And
good. It looks good.
Yeah.
And do you have the assistance of the DPW to put it in place, to carry it in, or how's that going to be accomplished?
We were waiting to get approval. I've spoken to the Swenson Granite, who did the bench for John, and then I will speak to Chase, but I think I can make it happen.
I think you can. I think you can. They've been, the DPW has been absolutely wonderful to work with, and Chase Berkeley is a true contributor to Milton and its citizens.
Yeah.
So we thank you. Are there any questions from commissioners? Are there any members of the public that would like to ask a question or make a comment? Seeing none, I think what would be the appropriate course of action would be to issue a negative determination. This is an RDA, so that a negative determination would allow you to go forward without further permitting. It will, I know there's some alteration, but we can determine as part of a negative determination that it is not there is no adverse impact to the resource areas that we protect. In fact, this would be an enhancement of the resource areas. So we applaud your efforts, and
Oh.
uh-oh, I can see you now. You're
There you
back.
are.
There you are. Okay. Did I freeze? Are you all froze to me?
You did, yeah.
All right. Is there a motion, Wendy, to issue a negative determination for this RDA?
Yes, so moved, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Second?
I'll second that.
All right. Thank you very much. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor? Say, I'll do a roll call vote. Wendy, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ingrid, how do you vote?
Aye.
Tom, how do you vote?
Aye.
And I, John Kiernan, vote aye as well. Thank you. So that's a unanimous decision in favor of putting this monument to Marvin Gordon. And thank you for doing that. I think it's great of you to honor his memory and his legacy.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Thank the committee.
Thank you.
We appreciate it
Good
very
night,
much.
all. Second on the agenda is 57 Hillcroft Road. Who is speaking for Hillcroft Road?
Donna Cicerone, owner of 57 Crowcroft Road, class one.
And you want to increase the size of your deck, is that correct?
Yes, right now we have a 12 by 12 deck and get a 14 by 20, and the 20 will go along the back of the house, not towards the marsh. So we're only coming out 2 more feet towards, our back property line. There it is right now. Uh-oh. Oh,
Yep, there we go.
There it is.
yeah. So that's the current deck.
Now, do you know how far, it's not on the plan. Our only concern is that we need to honor our 25-foot non-disturbance zone. This is a pretty easy area to distinguish where the resource area starts, where the marsh is. And you just need to be 25 feet away from that. It's not on the plan. From my having been in the area before, I think you're well outside of the 25-foot. But I think we should take a look at it. Steve, have you been there?
I have not been to this site, John, no.
All right.
But I do have a tape in the back of the van.
No, that's perfect. We could just lay it out. Now it'll simplify the process for you, Donna. If we could arrange a time on a Saturday morning, I can't make it this Saturday, but any of the next few Saturdays I can.
Okay.
We usually start at Sorry, Wendy, we usually start at 8 o'clock, but sometimes Wendy makes us start at 8:30 on a Saturday morning. We just show up, look at it. Steve can lay out the tape to make sure you're outside of the 25 feet. I don't think this will be an issue.
Great. I don't think either. We just took a tape measure. We added the 2 feet and then took a tape measure just out to our back fence. And out to the back fence is 40 feet.
Good, easy.
Yeah, I think so. Okay.
So this week is the 16th. The next week, Saturday would be the 23rd. Tom, can you make the 23rd?
Yes, I think so.
Wendy?
Sorry, I was just grabbing my calendar.
Okay.
I think that's okay.
All right, good. Ingrid?
I can't make it the 23rd or the 30th. Next time I can make it is the 7th.
Do you have construction plans, Donna, yet?
Well, we were hoping to get the guy to start in October. So yes and no. We
All right,
can't.
no, I understand. Why don't we do this, Ingrid, rather than kicking it to October, let's try to do it on the 23rd. And I'm sure that either Arthur or Todd or Hans will be available. So that'll give us a quorum. So why don't we set it up
John,
for,
my apologies. Could we, I actually can't make the 23rd. I just double checked, but the
All right.
30th would work.
all right. So why don't we do it on the 30th then? I just want to get it done as quickly as we can.
Okay, if there's a gate to get into my backyard, do I have to be here for you to measure it? Because we have an actual association meeting up in Maine on that day, on the 30th. So we're not going to be here, but I don't mind people going into my backyard.
All right, if you just give us permission, we won't bother anybody or anything, and we'll just go in and look and lay down the 25-foot tape, and we'll be on our way.
Sure, okay, sounds great.
All right, are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Any abutters or members of the public that would like to ask a question or be heard? I don't see anyone, so with your permission, Donna, we'll continue this until the 30th at Wendy? What time?
8:30?
Okay,
Thank you.
8:30 it is. You're driving the consensus. We'll be able to sleep in. 8:30 at 57 Hillcroft. All right.
Okay, so make a determination on the 30th, so we'll know.
Yes, that's a public meeting and we'll be able to vote.
Oh, okay, wonderful. Okay,
All right, and then stay in touch with Philip at the DPW, and you'll be able to get a copy of the signed document.
excellent. All right, thank
All
you
right.
very much. Yes,
And if we're being efficient, we should have the document with us, so we can sign it right there at your house. If we're being efficient. Okay. All right, thanks, Donna.
John, you have a question?
Yes, yes, Steve, there is a
John,
question.
you have a
Oh,
question for Ned, from Ned.
Ned, question.
John, I'm just getting a note I'm noticing in the chat, and also one of my consultants indicating that they're stuck in the waiting room and trying to get into the
Oh,
meeting.
sorry,
and
okay.
if someone can let them in.
Okay,
Okay,
thanks. Ned.
sure.
Great, thank you.
And I think we're stalling a bit on yours, Ned, anyway, aren't we? I think we're waiting for somebody. But now I can't remember who it was that couldn't get.
Sean Reardon from Tetra Tech had a hearing at 7 in another community and thought he would be here by 8.
By 8, okay, all right, fair enough. Thanks, Ned.
Thanks.
All right, we're good on number 2. Thank you, Donna. Number 3 is request for, yes? Okay, number 3 is request for determination of applicability at Blue Hills Parkway. This is lot C34A3. And that's an easy one. That is, and for the public's benefit, that is the Conservation Commission's application, which is for, it's a request for determination of applicability to place a sign, because that is that land has been conveyed to the Conservation Commission. So the sign will go up designating that as conservation land. It's to orient the public, what we're talking about is Blue Hills Parkway. If you're at the Ice House, on the driveway entrance closest to Mattapan. It's just to your right, not the first lot, but the second lot to your right, just abutting the stream. That land has been deeded to the Conservation Commission, so we're going to put a sign in. The reason for the application is that to put the post for the sign, it actually technically is an alteration, but we can determine that there's no significant adverse impact and vote to allow the sign to be placed there. And this is really part of the public education process to designate the land so that the public recognize it as conservation land. And this open space is really our part of trying to help in the climate change situation and preserve our open space and resources. Are there any comments from commissioners or questions from commissioners? Any abutters or members of the public that wish to be heard about placing the sign on the Conservation Commission land? Hearing none, is there a motion to issue a negative determination to allow the Conservation Commission to place a sign on the land recently deeded to it for ownership, control, and possession?
So moved.
Thank you, Wendy. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. And any discussion? Hearing none. Individual votes. Tom, how do you vote?
Aye.
Wendy, how do you vote?
Yes,
Ingrid, how do you vote?
Aye.
And I, John Kiernan, vote aye as well. Unanimous negative determination. Thank you. Moving on to number 4, request for certificate of compliance, the Harlan Street Dam. And do we have a presenter here? Sean, is that you?
Yeah, that's me.
Good.
So Sean McCanty, Neponset River Watershed Association. So this is a request for a certificate of compliance for closing the order of conditions on the Harlan Street Dam and Harling's Mill Dam project, which is we discussed on the July meeting. Paperwork snafu slightly through things, but happy to answer any questions.
All right, for the public's benefit, what we discussed in the July meeting was that what's called an order of conditions, essentially approving that the project was done and confirming that the project was done in conformance with the order of conditions that we issued a year ago or so for the dam project. And in fact, there were actually 3 components to that project, but we only had the plans before us for the one, which was at was that the one on Canton Avenue, right? Of the
That was on Canton Avenue,
okay.
the DCR property.
So we were lacking data on the other 2 areas or the other 2 components of the project. Sean, can you tell us where they were and what's been added to the file so we can vote on the whole project?
So the other 2 are, it was a flashboard removal at the Harlan Street Flood Control Dam and a widening of the existing breach in the Harling's Mill Dam, which is, it doesn't have a street address, so I can't quite give you exactly where it is. But it's the GPS coordinates are in the written document. And because they're both projects that did not require stamped plans, I didn't submit any new designs. But I think that is sufficient. Is that right, Steve?
No, I
Yes,
agree.
that's
That we had
correct.
asked for data just so that our records would reflect that there were 3 components to the project and all 3 were done in conformance with the order of conditions.
Correct.
And thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. Any questions from commissioners? Are there any questions from abutters or members of the public or comments? Hearing none, this is a request for issuance of the certificate of compliance. We have had public discussion in July and again tonight. So is there a motion to issue the certificate of compliance for this project?
I'll be glad to move that.
Thanks, Tom. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Wendy, thank you very much, Wendy. Any discussion? Hearing none, seeing none, I'll take a voice vote. Tom, how do you vote?
Aye.
Wendy, how do you vote?
Yes,
Ingrid, how do you vote?
Aye.
And I, John Kiernan, vote aye as well. That's unanimous. So the certificate will issue. Sean, thank you very much.
Yep,
I
thank you very
appreciate
much.
you following up.
Yep.
Next on the agenda is number 5. That's 37 Trout Brook Avenue. And this is also a continued hearing. In fact, for the public's benefit, this is a hearing that in part was before the board via Zoom, and we also we did a site visit at 37 Trout, so the commission has actually been there to inspect the site. Who's presenting tonight for this?
Good evening, Commission. This is Cameron Larson with ECR. I'll be presenting the project and be happy to proceed whenever you're ready.
We're ready. Go ahead, sir.
All right, excellent. Well, thanks for the introduction. As you mentioned, this project was open and presented by Brad Holmes of ECR. The project was described to the commission and then ultimately continued for a site visit by the members. So I hope all of you or most of you had a chance to get out to the site to take a look. Just to quickly refresh your memories, I'd be happy to share my screen to show the plans, if that's okay with the commission.
It is.
All right. And I'll just have to be enabled to share.
Steve, can you help out on that?
I think so. One moment, please. Just close some tabs here.
And I suppose I could just, I could proceed while we're waiting for Steve on that. So it's 37 Trout Brook. It's a single family home property, very typical of the area, surrounded by lawn and landscaped areas. There's a deck off the rear of the home. This project involves a proposed addition to the rear of the home. The addition's located within the footprint of an existing bump out that includes existing living space within the house and then within an area of the existing deck. There's also a small front entryway addition proposed as part of this project as well.
You should be able to share.
All right, excellent. I'm going to pull up a little presentation plan that we had prepared. So this is looking at the rear of the home here. This photograph down below kind of gives you a view of what exists now. In this graphic above, this darker brown, we've highlighted this bump out area that currently exists here, at the first floor level and then down below, and then the existing deck along the back of the house. So what's being proposed is this entire bump out and deck are proposed to be removed, and a new addition within the footprint of the bump out and deck is proposed to be constructed. I'm going to scroll down here to show you what the new layout looks like. So here in the dark brown is the proposed addition, and then the proposed new deck off to the side of that. This will all be at the height of the first floor, so it's all going to be pile supported. There'll be the actual bump out down below at the basement level is going to be completely removed. This next image kind of shows you that depiction. So as you can see, this addition is only up above on that first floor living space, pile supported, and then that bump out that would be down below is being removed. So it's all within the footprint of these existing structures, to the rear of the home. Lastly, the project does include some mitigation. I'm going to zoom out here and show you the mitigation plan. There is a slight increase in degraded riverfront. So to comply with the riverfront regulations, we're proposing 2-to-1 mitigation along the rear of the property. Let's see if I can get this pulled up here for you. So we'll have a planting area at the rear of the property nearest the river. So this is existing lawn that'll all be turfed off and replanted with native species. And that's all spec'd out here on the plan with the methodology included. So with that, I'd be happy to open it up to any questions that the commission may have.
Sure. Ingrid, Wendy, can you take a look at that planting plan and give us your insight? I didn't mean to exclude you, Tom. I just automatically looked at them for plants.
No, it looks good.
Yeah.
It looks great. Looks great.
I agree.
All right.
I would
Steve,
agree
any
with that.
comments from you? Steve?
No, I think it's excellent. It's excellent list.
Yeah, agree.
Yep.
All right, and for the public's benefit, when we were actually on site, we had asked for two things. One is we needed to have the plans include the FEMA flood zone on the plan itself. And secondly, we discussed the use of the piers or helical piles to get to basically avoid putting a foundation footings in below ground. And you've done both of those things. I don't have the plan right in front of me, but did you add the FEMA zone?
Yes, the plan's been revised. We've submitted those for the record, so the office should have those at this point.
All right, Steve, have you seen that?
Yes, I sure have.
Good, all right. Well, those are the two things that we had last discussed at our site visit. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Are there abutters or members of the public that have a question or would like to make a comment? I think when we were at our last meeting, we did discuss some of our regular conditions, sometimes called boilerplate conditions, and that includes that there will be during the construction process, there will be erosion controls required. There's a prohibition about storing motorized equipment or gas or petroleum fed equipment within our resource area, within our jurisdiction, actually. So no overnight storage and no refueling within our jurisdiction of that equipment. Any other conditions that people have? Did we talk about a pre-construction meeting, Steve?
We
always
didn't, but we
like to
should
see
now.
that. Yeah, I always like to see that. If you could contact Steve, and he's pretty accessible to get out there just before you start.
Yep, that's not a problem.
All right. Any other comments, questions from commissioners? Any abutters, members of the public that would like to be heard? Hearing none, I don't think we have any other special conditions other than erosion controls and the overnight refueling and storage. Other than that, is there a motion to issue the order of conditions as discussed?
So moved.
Thanks, Tom. Is there a second?
I'll
Second.
second, John.
All right, thanks, Wendy. Any discussion among commissioners? Hearing none, individual vote. Tom, how do you vote?
Aye.
Wendy,
Yes,
Ingrid,
Aye.
and John, I as well. Unanimous. You've got your order of conditions.
Excellent. Thank you very much,
Cam-
Commissioner.
Cameron, thank you very much. Thanks, Brad.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Thanks. Good night.
All right, next on the agenda is 107, 111 Highland Street, lot K-2-2, I guess 5, continued hearing. Is it, Ned, are you in a position to proceed? Do you have Sean?
I don't know whether Sean is joined.
I'm just admitting him now.
Okay.
Hey, good timing.
Perfect.
I may not see him pop up,
Okay,
Steve.
Sean,
so
are you
can
there?
I see Sean.
All right, good, perfect.
Great.
All right, we're ready to begin.
Impeccable.
Good timing, right on the nose. Thank you very much. This is a continued hearing. It involves the Memory Care Center, 107, 111 Highland Street. When we last met in August, there was some discussion about questions that had come up and the retention by the Conservation Commission of a consultant for hydrological purposes. And basically, we had two areas of questions. One had to do with the impact of mounding as to whether or not it would go on the Reedsdale Road side of Highland Street down Spafford, because we had heard from many of the neighbors. And the answer that we received from Tetra Tech was no, it won't cross that divide. Because for the public's benefit, there are two watersheds here. One is where the building is going, and that actually sends the water towards Canton Avenue and Wendell Park and eventually into Pine Tree Brook. The other watershed heads the other way towards Unquity Brook and towards the Academy and Milton Cemetery. So that was one question. Are we going to back any water up? The answer was no. The second question was what we call a water budget, and to see whether or not the change in surface water discharge direction, et cetera, would do anything positive or negative to the vernal pool? And or would it change the amount of water that was being discharged? Because from our perspective, our standard is to ensure that there's no increase, there's no net increase in the amount of water going onto adjoining properties. And the answer to that one came back from Tetra Tech, who was our consultant, although it's paid for by the applicant. And the answer to that was no, there's no net increase, and the stormwater design kept it within the permittable standards. And at the time, also in August, Scott Horsley had asked them additional questions, and we may have a response to those questions. And I will turn to Sean. Can you summarize your responses to Scott Horsley's question? Is Scott here tonight, by the way? I don't see him, but Sean, you know what the questions are, right?
Yeah. First, Scott was asking for, hydrologic and water quality analysis to be done. And in my opinion, that work has been done as part of demonstrating compliance with the stormwater standards. I don't know if Scott is endeavoring on suggesting that a more detailed analysis is required, but I would disagree with that point too. I think the type of changes that are proposed by the project are well within the normal sphere of sort of mitigation that you'd see under the stormwater standards. And then he seems to suggest that there are significant changes to the groundwater patterns as a result from the project, which we don't see any basis for that. If I could just sort of elaborate for a second, groundwater moves very slow. I mean, in the order of, fast groundwater is a foot a day. So you can imagine any introduction of infiltration or something like that is mostly going to be vertical. There's not going to be much, if any, lateral impact of an infiltration system. So any groundwater mounds would be localized to wherever that infiltration system is and not likely to sort of propagate out through the rest of the site. And then, one thing Scott mentioned during the meeting was he said that he had done some analysis that indicated a 0.5 to 0.6 foot rise in groundwater at the wetlands. And we didn't see anything in the record that would suggest that, nor did we see anything from Scott that sort of demonstrated that. So we sort of wanted to go on the record saying that wasn't necessarily a supported opinion.
All right, thanks, Sean. Other questions from commissioners who have seen the report from Tetra Tech and Sean Reardon? I'm looking for Dan Hill. I can't see everybody on the screen. Is Dan Hill here? I don't see him. Who would like to speak? Bard, do you want to ask?
I'd like to speak. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Bard. I reside 11 Spafford Road. Thanks, Sean, Ned, and team. I don't know if there was maybe some confusion as to, because this application, I guess, was withdrawn and is either being resubmitted or, I'm not sure how that all works, but maybe Dan and Scott weren't aware that this was happening tonight. But I would just summarize.
If I can, Bud, and I apologize for interrupting you, but just to set the record straight, because you raised a good question, this permit application was not withdrawn before the Conservation Commission. It's my understanding that it was withdrawn before the Planning Board and then resubmitted.
Okay,
but
that's correct.
The permit before us has not been withdrawn.
Okay, so they may, I don't know, but there may have been some confusion there to explain as to why they're not here. Again, I'm just speculating, but I think the concern and my understanding from talking with Scott and, is we have, a row of houses that are maybe 30 feet, 40 feet away from a significant area of wetland. And this proposed plan takes away about 2 acres of what is currently permeable soil and forest and paves it over, with the footprint of the building, with driveways, with a raised bridge over 2 stream crossings, with retaining walls up to 10 feet of concrete. And what that necessarily means is, although, I think everyone agrees, it's been said before, it's the same amount of rainwater that's landing in this area, that water can't dissipate into the ground the way it used to if this goes forward. There's going to be a significant increase into the recharge rates into the water that's going into the wetlands that are right up against people's houses. And these people have along Highland Street and on Spafford as well, systems, sump pumps and French drains that are constantly working, particularly this summer. I mean, we can prepare the data and show to you how many gallons of water are being pumped around. And so it's, yes, you may say that there's one watershed that goes down towards Canton Ave, one watershed that goes down towards Reedsdale, but this lot that they're looking to develop sits at about 130, 140 feet. It's going down into the wetland, which is about 125 feet above sea level if you look at the Milton GIS mapper. And like I said, people's homes are right there, just across the street from Highland, which itself is a very narrow roadway. So, Scott's analysis, the way I read it in the comment letter, which he did submit to this commission, raised a number of issues, including the mounding issue, which is that the water in that wetland will increase. The volume of water going through the wetland will increase. And I do modeling for a living. I'm a data analyst and statistical modeler, consultant, with advanced degrees in statistics. I know you can tweak parameters here to show that, there's no impact, but the modeling, as far as I understand it, and the performance standards that they're using are decades old. And Scott's analysis is aiming to do an actual hydrological analysis of the impacts of taking away this 2 acres of permeable land, making it impermeable, and what happens to the wetlands surrounding it, and what happens to people's homes that were built in the 30s and 40s and maybe even the 10s and 20s all along Highland that are really already inundated with water, given that this whole area is just so wet. So those are the concerns, and I think from our perspective, we'd like to see the full hydrological analysis, with due respect to Sean. And so, we very much appreciate the chance to present that in an upcoming meeting. Like I said, this whole process has been a little confusing, at least for me. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Bud. The other members of the public or abutters that would like to be heard? And I may not be, I see a hand raised from a phone, but I don't know. No, I just lost it. Do you see a hand raised, Steve?
I do not.
I don't, I lost it. All right, are there any other questions or comments by members of the public of whether they're an abutter or not? I don't see any, and I'm scrolling through here to see if I can find it. I don't see them. Commission members, any questions, comments? No, now I see Jack Irwin and a hand by Sharon and Teresa O'Brien. Now I'm getting hands. All right. Let me, I'll just go left to right on my screen. Sharon, I don't have a last name.
Hi, I'm Sharon Rich, 43 Spafford Road. I just want to thank everyone for their time. Most importantly, I just want to let everyone know that Bard Hyriza, who just spoke, I have the exact same concerns he has. I don't want to, reiterate everything he said. I just want everyone to know I fully support everything he said. And thank you, everyone, for your time.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Jack Irwin, I'm just going left to right here. I've got a hand raised and it says Jack Irwin, but you're on mute.
Hello, this is Gene Irwin on Jack Irwin's phone. I live at 120 Highland Street. Can you hear me?
Yes, Gene, go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, I was having trouble with my phone getting in. I apologize. I agree with Mrs. Rich and with Bard, and I won't belabor those points. I'd just like to add two, besides, we're losing the impervious surface, we're losing 600 trees that were soaking up the water. To me, it just doesn't make sense that we're not going to have more water at the site. Also, I'm concerned that there's thousands of feet of retaining walls to hold back this water. I'm thinking, hey, if you can build across the street from me, you can build in the Neponset estuary. Same thing. It's all water. And if you put 2,000 feet of retaining walls down there, sure, you can build it and call it dry. Last meeting, I watched people from Fuller Lane and all over town, the average residents, And I thought the Conservation Commission was excellent in protecting the wetlands and that sort of thing. And I hope we get the same level across the street. I don't see it personally. I don't see anything close to what the average resident is facing. There's still been discussions about all the snow, and we got a 700-foot long driveway and we got about 10 feet to put all the snow behind it. So I had brought up at a previous meeting, maybe it was planning board, but if you do the math and you try to stack up that snow 10 feet, it's going to be 150 feet high. So now we have to have a snow farm someplace locally where we can take all this snow. And again, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of trucks coming out of there, or it's more water into the property. So and like Scott Horsley, I didn't think this meeting was going to happen tonight. I thought it was going to be postponed to a later date while the new proposal was coming. And I think a lot of people thought the same thing. So as I say, I just hope that the Northbridge group has to face the same stuff the average resident does. And I believe if they do, this is never going to happen. And I personally so far think there's a double standard, a massive double standard, because some people just have like a corner of a porch step facing the wetlands, and Northbridge has these 10-foot retaining walls in the wetlands. And they're looking to me for waivers everywhere on this property. And again, I can't speak highly enough against Northbridge. So again, I just hope the Conservation Commission eventually treats Northbridge like they treat the average resident, and I'll be satisfied. Thank you.
Thank you, Gene. Teresa O'Brien, is your hand raised?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, hey, how are you? I'm Teresa O'Brien. I live at 42 Spafford Road. I just wanted to say I agreed with everyone else that just spoke from Spafford. It's like I live right across the street from the development, and my sump pump is constantly going. So the thought of them taking down all those trees, like I definitely have to get more sump pump, another sump pump or two. It's constantly going now. So just please, I hope everyone considers all the neighbors in the neighborhood right next door. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Lisa, I don't want to miss anybody, but I don't see any other hands.
Is Sharon's hand still up? Nope, I guess not. She just took it down.
All right. I'd like to address like three things, because some good points were made. And maybe I'm oversimplifying the concern on the Spafford Road side of Highland Street. The reason we went to a hydrologist was to get confirmation of what our belief was, that the water is going to go downhill. I'm not being facetious, but water runs downhill. And it's my understanding, and I think we have support for this proposition from Sean O'Riordan and Tetra Tech, that the water that people are concerned about, legitimately concerned about, is going away from Spafford Road, not towards it. And I'm talking about water that is either surface water, groundwater, or mounding. It's all headed in the other direction. And the measurements that we're insisting upon is to ensure that there's no increase of the discharge off of the property, but downstream. And downstream is going away from Spafford Road. So unless I'm mistaken, that was our original question. And I think it's been answered. The next point is the trees, and Gene Irwin makes a good point. That's a lot of trees, but going way back to the beginning, we had a tree survey done, and the applicant acknowledged that there would have to be replacement pursuant to our performance standards. And the performance standard is if you take down, we measure it by circumference inches at breast height, and you have to match the circumference, the sum of the circumference inches that are taken out, you have to replace them. Now, obviously, you can't replace all those trees, so we have a money equivalent. And if you do the math on our performance standard, it comes out to, I'm going to just approximate this, but it's about a $300,000 contribution to what we've referred to as the virtual tree fund for the Conservation Commission. So that is our performance standard. We've been consistent in applying that standard. And the applicant has acknowledged that that is the standard and that would be the cost, either in trees or in dollars. The third point that was brought up, and Gene, you brought this up too, the snow, and we do need to have the comfort level that the O&M plan is going to include, where the snow is going to be stacked, whether or not it's going to have any kind of a de-icing agent, because you're powerfully close to the wetlands here, and we don't want snow with chemical agents stacked next to the wetlands. And if not, we have to have some level of confidence that there's a place to take the snow. And if it's going to be taken out by truck, what are we thinking about in terms of truck traffic? I know it's been addressed, but I'd like to hear a little bit more of detail on the snow removal plan. And maybe Ned, you could handle that, or you could defer to somebody else.
I would, thanks, John. I would defer to Paul Avery, who prepared the O&M plan.
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, as this just came up a moment ago, John, I sort of on my other screen here looking and going, where's the latest version of the O&M plan? But we did talk about it, and we provided some MSDS sheets on friendly de-icing agents that we would use. So, it's a few months back, so I have to dig it up exactly how we stated it, but I'm quite certain that the O&M plan addressed that concern.
Okay, I think we've got to satisfy all the commission members, and I don't mean to pick on Wendy, but you're the chemical analyst for us, Wendy. I've lost you. I can't see you here, but I know you're there.
You mean Ingrid? Ingrid.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, Ingrid.
Yeah, no, we were advocating the calcium-based salt, and I think they were in agreement,
Yes.
but I can't remember. Is that correct?
Yes,
Ned?
we did
Yeah, I thought so.
modify the chemical treatments to comply with the suggestions that you made.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah,
All right,
and
well,
there's a data sheet. I can't find it at the moment. There was a data sheet that was submitted with that.
Yeah, I recall that as well.
Right. No, I remember talking about it, and I remember receiving the data, but what I'm concerned with is that we don't just kind of brush over it with a broad brush. I want to make sure that we're very precise in the terms and conditions. If an order is to issue, I want to make sure there's no mistake about this. And because it's going to be done with specificity, I want to make sure that we have exactly what the terms and conditions are. Like the tree replacement, I just kind of guessed at that, Ned. You probably have a better memory than I with respect to the amount of money, but it was pretty significant.
It is, and it's a large number. And what I would suggest is if the commission were to issue an order, that we would be required to inventory with an arborist each tree that is removed within your jurisdiction, account for trees that are replaced, and then account for the total value that would have to pay as a net difference. And that we would do that certainly as a requirement before any certificate of compliance would be issued.
Yeah, that was my understanding from the beginning, but I thought you had done a tree survey early on.
We have done a tree survey. The number, and I don't have it in front of me, is substantial. It's several $100,000, as you suggest. I think it's higher than 300,000. I think it's somewhat higher than that, but it is substantial. We are aware of it, and we accept it. That's the obligation of the project.
All right. Well, those are my three areas: trees, snow, and the water heading downhill. Other commission members, Wendy, Tom, Ingrid.
I have a comment. I don't have the plans in front of me, but one of the issues was the invasive plants, particularly the Japanese knotweed that grows up and down Highland Street.
All right.
Yeah, and as I remember the plans, the plans had a limit of work that was shown by a heavily dashed line. And it seemed to follow the driveway in and didn't include the area along the road. So I would wonder if a contractor came in and saw that plan, he would say, well, how can I do anything along Highland Street because it's outside the limit of work? I wonder if anybody's familiar with the plans could say whether that contradiction can be addressed.
I think we did account in the invasive species management plan for the removal of invasives along Highland Street. I know that Arthur Allen accounted for that.
Yes, I don't mean to interrupt, but I did read that carefully, and there was a good text description of what should be done. Namely, he described how the knotweed should be killed, and he also said that in order to replace the vegetation there, he advocated the see what happens method, which is a good one. See what natives come in to replace what you have killed. And that's, I think, a good idea in that area because it's sloped. And if you do rip out the knotweed, you'll have material going down in the wetland. So I'm in agreement with his scheme, but according to the limit of work, none of that work can be performed because it's outside the limit of work. So I think maybe a plan has to be withdrawn to be explicit that there's more work areas than shown on the plan.
Paul, can you address that? You're muted.
Yeah, I know. So, usually what we do is, the limit of work is sort of often just generally put in there for, as you pointed out, Tom, is contractual purposes, and this is what the site contractor owns. The person who does the mitigation may or may not be the same party, but, I think we're certainly open and, the intent is what the intent is, and, conditions of this project, if we revise, move the limit of work around and make it include the whole site, whatever we want to do. I mean, a lot of why we put that in there was just to show that we were looking to, consolidate the site work and earth moving within the area of what we've got. So there's no intention to preclude any of the invasive species management that's been proposed.
We could
Thank
certainly,
you. That was my concern.
and we would certainly accept a condition that would require us to submit a limit of work plan for the removal of the invasives for Steve Iverson, the commission's review and approval.
Thank you.
Anything else, Wendy, Ingrid?
Not at this time,
John, I
John.
have a one quick question, John. This is Steve.
Yeah.
I was looking, Paul, this is directed toward you, on plan C-303. And it's the flood storage areas 1 and 2. And I see that the flood storage area 2, where there's some compensatory flood storage, Paul, there are some very narrow areas and they come to a point. And I was just wondering about how you construct those real carefully. Can they be constructed in the field with existing equipment besides shovels? If you go to those pages, Paul, I don't know if you have them available.
No, I do. Okay. And a lot of times they're bound, like in some of them, they're bound by some of the lines that exist in the ground, which are drawn in the plan, which may be connecting the dots by the wetlands flags so that the wetlands resource areas don't count as, bordering land subject to flooding. And they're also somewhat bound by the shape of how the existing contours are plotted. So you get some of these, irregular features that really that's just sort of the area that results when you look at the difference between what we're counting as a new flood storage based on the proposed contours and what the demarcation was on the other side of it. So, it's not intended to be unrealistically surgical. It's just kind of what you get.
Okay, but how do you construct them?
you just grade to
You
the,
construct
to
something
the,
else than that's what's shown on the plan, right?
yeah. So if I can share screen, I mean,
okay.
what were you, I need permission here. Which one? Were you interested in flood storage area 1 or 2?
Flood storage area 2 specifically. And let me
Okay.
see if I can find you and give you some permissions here. One moment. Let's see. I'm gonna make you a co-host, for example. So that should do it.
It seems to have done it. Okay, do you have my screen here?
Yes.
Okay, so for
Yes,
instance, just look at this
exactly.
one. What's that?
Yep.
This is what you're talking about,
Yes,
right?
exactly. That's the issue.
Okay, so basically you grade the 123 contour where shown. So basically this, you just draw, you grade this back to where the 123 contour is shown, where the 124 contour is shown, and the 125 contours are shown. The pointy area, it's bounded on this side by the wall, and it's bounded on this side just by where the existing 123 contour. So that's just the shape of the region that's when we're not proposing an irregular digging here at all. It's just that's what the shape of the region is when you try to calculate the area.
Right, but practically, how do you do it? That's my question. How do you go out there and actually do that?
It's just earth moving. I mean, you're just going to remove some soil in here to lower the grade.
And those are very difficult figures to create, even with earth moving equipment.
No. So the 123 contour follows this line here. And all we're going to do is just pull this back slightly so that we just remove, a few inches of earth in here, just create some additional storage.
And it may be that it's done with
Okay.
shovels.
Right. That's why I asked about the shovels.
Yeah, I mean, you've got it. I mean, whether the means and methods, but basically, you're in this particular area here, you're talking about pulling off about 6 inches of material, to pull the 123 back several feet.
Great. That answers the question. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Paul.
I have another question, and it goes to something that either Gene said or it was something that triggered in my mind. Someone had mentioned the non-disturbance zone, and I want to make sure that we're treating all applicants equally. And that is something that's considered very seriously by the Conservation Commission. And in my understanding from prior public meetings is that the fire department, the fire chief, it indicated that there needed to be an increase in the turnaround area. So increase the part of the driveway that clipped a pretty small section of the 25-foot. My memory is it was like 60 square feet or something of that nature. But the question that I had in my mind was whether or not there's any remediation for that 60 feet. We have and for the public's benefit, we have a separate vote that has to be taken if there's a request to infringe upon the 25-foot non-disturbance zone. That's the town bylaw. So we'd have to have a separate vote that either there is no significant adverse impact to the resource area or that there was some kind of mitigation for that. And I can't recall whether or not there was a specific remediation or replication for that section. I know there are other sections that are being replicated for other changes in the resource area. But for that particular amount of 25-foot square footage, that is the 25-foot non-disturbance zone square footage, is there a plan to replicate that?
To replicate the non-disturbance zone impacts?
Yeah, yes, or remediate is a better word. I'm not suggesting that it has to be, replicating a wetland, but I'm asking whether or not there's any kind of a remediation plan for that square footage.
We went to great extents to minimize the impacts of it. We did not quantify the impacts to the non-disturbance zone. Therefore, it had not specifically proposed any remedial measures.
All right, I'm just trying to look for uniformity and applying the town bylaw. And I don't think it would be a huge task to increase, some other area of protected land, just to make up. Am I correct that we're talking in the vicinity of 60 square feet? Ned, you might know that. I don't think it's very much, but it exists, so I don't want to ignore it.
You're muted, Ned.
Mr. Chair, if I could add just a little bit of sort of discussion. When we were discussing the improvements that the fire chief and I were recommending get made that resulted in that encroachment, one of the things we considered was that there was a big area that was net beyond the 25 feet that was sort of protected, that was in excess of the 25 feet that was more than equivalent to that area that we lost. So there was some sort of internal discussion about that as part of that consideration that considered that 60 square feet or so.
Well, and that's exactly what I'm looking for, so that we can, for record purposes, say that, okay, we lost 60 square feet here, but we made up for it somewhere else by some enhancement of the resource area.
Understood. So in our particular example, we were looking at other areas on the wetland side of the wall where the offset dimension was larger than 25 feet. So we saw that there was quite a bit of area there that offset for that 60-foot loss.
All right, is it possible for you to quantify that? Again, I'm trying to dot i's and cross t's here. It's like a record that was done.
We can do that. I know that in one of the plans that we showed either last month or the month before, we had a table that identified the additional square footage, particularly of direct wetland impacts, but also I think of the NDA impacts as well.
Yeah, so that's right. We talked about, yes. Okay, so let me look. I'll probably need a couple minutes, so.
Okay.
While Paul looks, Mr. Chairman, could I make a comment?
Is that Bard speaking? Yes, yes, indeed.
Thank you very much, and I'll try to keep this brief. I know there's other things on the agenda as well. Would it be possible if I could just share my screen very quickly?
I believe so. Steve, do you need to help him?
Yeah, hit the button.
Yeah. Just hang on a sec.
Thank you, Steve.
Hang on a sec. Yep. There you go.
Can everyone see that?
You started screen share. There it is. Got it.
You got it? Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Steve. Thanks, everyone. So just on your earlier point on the groundwater and the mounding, Mr. Chairman, and I would respectfully disagree that's been resolved, and I'd like to just to illustrate here the point. And this is from an earlier plan that shows in green the wetlands. On the right side here, you can see Highland Street, and you can see how close people's homes are to these wetlands. And as I understand it, the wetland is defined as having being saturated with water 12 inches or higher below grade, below the ground for the majority of the year. And he's not on the call, as we know, but hydrologist Scott Horsley's analysis showed that this green area here, this wetland, will grow as a result of removing, this whole area where you see this proposed building and these driveways is trees. It's all ground that's accepting water. Taking 2 acres of that away necessarily will increase his analysis finds this wetland will grow. So I think you can, I understand the point that water rolls downhill, but for much of the year, the water in the wetland right now is just standing water. If you go there right now, it's wet. It's just standing water. It's not flowing anywhere. So if this edges of this green wetland grow, which is what Scott's analysis suggests, now all of a sudden the water table is going to be a little bit higher for these houses all up and down Highland right here that are, in some places, if you look at, I forget the number of maybe 110 Highland, you're talking about 30 feet. The 42 Spafford, which is the one here on the corner of Spafford and Highland, it might be 40 feet. These foundations are perilously close to this wetland, which, as I said, is saturated with water for most of the year. Storm water, yes, well, a lot of it runs off, but a lot of it also remains, and that's why these areas are so wet. And on the second point on the non-disturbance zones, already before the adjustments to address the concerns for site access, that they just don't have the room to safely have a fire truck turn around in there, never mind other emergency vehicles. They were encroaching on the 25-foot non-disturbance zone by planning to build retaining walls, some up to 10 foot high, that would shade the 25-foot non-disturbance, which is by definition a disturbance. And now, in order to provide adequate site access for emergency vehicles, they're talking about flat out just going over the line. And I know you said 60 square feet, but my memory from the last meeting was there was an area to the kind of the east of the building here, and then also an area in the back. So if you look at the linear footage that they're crossing over, it's probably hundreds of linear feet that they're going across the 25-foot non-disturbance zone, which, if you look at what other communities are starting to come around to, given the intensity of storms that we've seen, 3 inches of rain in 1 hour in Leominster yesterday, the 25 feet is just not much at all. And so, they're not able to respect it even from the beginning with those retaining walls, and now they're having to violate it completely. That just increases the footprint of this, where, it's our opinion that, they could shrink it down by 20%, and really do the responsible thing to protect these wetlands properly. So thank you very much. I'll stop there.
All right. Thank you, Bud. And just so that we don't conflate two different issues here, there's a difference between a limited project crossing of a wetland to accomplish a project and encroaching on the 25-foot non-disturbance zone. A limited project is allowed by state statute to cross the wetland, and that would, by definition, you'd have to cross the 25-foot non-disturbance zone too. So we're talking about two really different issues, because we were looking at an encroachment that wasn't necessarily the road crossing to get to the back parking lot. We're talking about the fire chief's request to increase the circumference of the turnaround area. It's a bit of a different concept. But I appreciate your comments, because you're essentially responding to us, because we want to dot the i's and cross the t's as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, no, that helps me with the stream crossings understand. I guess maybe, and I apologize, I probably didn't explain it well, but I guess, so I think I'm showing the plan from 721 here, if you can see it. I guess my comment was on the fact that, and this is, again, it's not color coded, so it's not exactly. I like the other one because it can, the green really helps me, and the red for the non-disturbance zone. But what I understand here is that if you look, it's the same kind of picture, but these red lines and these gray lines are right on top of each other. So basically, the 25-foot they're pushing the envelope to the limit, to the absolute edge of where they can build, and in fact crossing over it in several places. Which we've asked respectfully all along that this is just excessive. That given how wet this entire site is, how they're really trying to thread the needle, putting this much concrete and impervious surface is really a recipe for long-term detriment to the whole area. Given what we're seeing in increased precipitation and all of the climate change impacts, that it'd be short-sighted for us to only ensure this kind of bare minimum. And in fact, they've openly said, as you mentioned, they have to provide access, they have to violate these lines. So thank you very much. And I'll be quiet now.
Thank you, Brian. Dan, let me see, Dan O'Neill.
Yeah, good evening, Dan O'Neill, 15 Spafford Road. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman and the Commission. I appreciate the opportunity to speak about this project. Not to reiterate everything that the neighborhood coalition here has spoken about tonight, but I was just thinking about the previous item agenda that was spoken about tonight in regards to the gentleman trying to put an addition onto the back of his house, and about how, you know, the commission was very adamant about not having any adverse impact zone disturbances, whether or not a person is going to fuel like a lawnmower or park a car back there overnight. And when I look at these plans here with the parking lot, would this same orders of condition apply to the project itself? When people are parking their cars overnight, if they have maintenance vehicles, they're going to fuel up lawn equipment to do, you know, maintenance work or do landscaping work as well. So that's just one point that I have. I guess I just formed in a long question.
Yeah, fair question. I think the difference here is between a construction performance standard versus you know, a function. We have lots of parking lots that are near to wetlands, like Heritage Hall, the American Legion down on Granite Avenue. That's near a wetland. That's a parking area because that abuts the DPW. So there are different things that are imposed. And I say things, there are different protections like a curbing or a berm of some kind to prevent any kind of sheet flow off of a parking area. So again, that's all been considered and is part of the plan itself. So you're talking about two different standards. One is the construction standard during the process. And we would not allow things like a backhoe, because, you know, backhoes have those hydraulic hoses, they pop all the time. So we don't want those stored anywhere, anytime near the wetlands. But for cars, that's a function that we can live with as long as there are appropriate berms. And if there is drainage in the area, then we have sump pumps and catch basins to catch and detain any kind of a contaminant. So there are two different sets of performance standards that are operating simultaneously.
So if that homeowner put a berm along the river, you wouldn't have any problem with that. And they could store as many vehicles as they wanted.
Well, it depends on the kind of vehicle. We've had there were buses being stored. I don't mean to pick on Heritage Hall, but we've issued orders periodically that they can't store buses there. But yeah, they can park cars there. So I guess the answer to your question is yes, it depends upon the use. I know we had equipment stored up on Blue Hill Avenue on a construction storage facility, and we asked and he complied. We asked the owner to not store particular kinds of construction equipment next to, I think it's Balsterbrook in that section. Between Blue Hill Avenue and Canton Avenue. So we do that all the time. So yes, we allow some things like driveways with cars in them and parking lots with the cars in them. But it depends on what the use is. So what you heard and appropriately heard was that for construction purposes, we're very concerned with any kind of hydraulic equipment that customarily pop their hoses and discharge some kind of petroleum products.
Got it. All right, thank you for the clarification. So the residents here have retained the services of Dan Hill, and through Dan Hill, we have hired Scott Horsley as our hydrologist. And as other people have mentioned tonight, that there's been some misunderstanding in regards to Northbridge and the representatives refiling their application with the planning board. And I've been following this as well as all my neighbors have been following very closely. And we're not attuned to the fine details of what applications are filed affect other boards and how they crisscross and are referred over, voted over, etc. I respectfully request that the Conservation Commission would be able to consider the findings of Scott Horsley, who is an expert hydrologist, findings or analysis to be presented to the Conservation Commission before any vote is rendered on an order of condition, or whether or not you pass it on to another board. And that's pretty much all I have to say.
All right, Dan, let me ask you though, are you talking about what he submitted before? Because he did submit written comments before that were responded to.
Well, yes, I apologize for interrupting you. Well, there's been a number of discussion points that I think that respectfully, if Scott could, address exactly what Mr. Reardon was explaining to the board as an expert counterpoint to what he was saying.
I think he already did. I think Sean Reardon was responding to Scott Horsley's.
But I don't think that Mr. Horsley has presented his final analysis to the board officially. I just think it was in letter comment.
Understood, Dan. Thank you. We've got a couple more hands. We've got to move this along because we've got other things on the agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nadine, Hannah, you've got your hand up.
Hi, thank you for having me, Nadine Hanna, 11 Stafford Road. I just wanted to make a comment in regards, please, to the proposal for the number of trees that are being proposed to be removed. 300 or so trees. I understand that they can be replaced by a similar caliper or measurement and or reimbursed, paid reimbursement to the town. I think the point, though, that's being skipped over, to put a facility this large to deforest that area, to increase issues with water, as everyone has spoken to, replacing, 50%, 80%, 100% of those trees throughout town is not the same thing to our neighborhood and our local piece of the community for where those trees exist now, and the function that we are getting from them, to the naturescape, to the water, to the aesthetics, etc. So as much as we appreciate and understand that there is this kind of 1-for-1 replacement ratio that would be expected, again, either by a physical tree of similar size and caliper and or by financial compensation, it's not 1-for-1 for those of us who live here, right? We're still just removing the trees. The trees are going to be gone, and in their place, there will be a very, very large facility, that did not exist before, in addition to the parking lot, in addition to the dump and the dumpsters, in addition to the loading docks, in addition to the traffic, in addition to the potential chemical spilling from the snow removal, et cetera, et cetera. And I do think the point keeps getting skipped over that this is a significant negative impact to this natural landscape, that once we remove this natural landscape, this forest, it can't be replaced. A tree here and there can be replaced, but we cannot reforest this area once it is stripped down, leveled, built upon hardscapes. And I think we're doing an incredible disservice to our town and to this particular neighborhood by allowing this to happen at this site and the scope of this project. And when the neighbors did ask multiple times that it be suggested, recommended, or requested that they reduce the size and scope of the project, Mr. Corcoran and Northbridge told us it was a non-starter. And so we are being dictated to by developers from out of town exactly how it is that they're going to change the nature, the environment that we are all currently living in. And this has been really skipped over quite a few times, not by anyone on the council committee. It's just we're getting really enveloped in the conversation of what it will take for these guys to come in and build, and maybe missing the point that what they're trying to build, not the purpose and the function of the building, but what the size, the scope, the impact on this neighborhood and on this town maybe is not appropriate to begin with. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadine. Very articulate. I'm trying to get everybody, but Paul Avery, hand up.
Yeah, Paul's.
Yep, thank you. So I was correct in what I said earlier, that we never officially quantified the impacts to the non-disturbance zone. However, as we were going back, I mean, so initially we didn't have any non-disturbance zone impacts at all, except for what we needed to do the crossings, which you spoke about earlier, which have happened by definition. So the non-disturbance zone impacts arose when we, provided the additional accommodations, for the fire chief and public safety and access in general. As we were going through that with Tetra Tech, I had actually quantified it. We just never really prepared it or submitted it. So going back through some of my worksheets here, I did quantify the impacts, and it's about 900 square feet. So replicating a non-disturbance zone, you can't really replicate a non-disturbance zone unless it's already disturbed. As opposed to wetlands, you can take areas that aren't wetlands and make them wetlands. But if you have a wetland, you can't create new non-disturbance zones unless they're already disturbed. And the place where we have that here is actually on the 107 lot with the barn and some of the gravel driveway through it. So we hadn't quantified this. We hadn't tried to, identify any specific mitigations, but by the process of removing the barn and the gravel in the disturbed area of the house and property that formerly was constructed on the 107, very quickly take that off at about 4,000 square feet. So just, by virtue of restoring the 107 lot, we more than offset the non-disturbance zone impacts that we needed to provide for public safety.
All right, thanks, Paul. And I agree with you. I used the term replication and I shouldn't have. It should have been remediation. Something
Whatever.
that's changed.
But yeah, you look at it as like how do you do it unless it's disturbed already? And that we have that condition actually on the 107 lot. So
you are correct.
Okay.
But so I guess the bottom line of what you just said is that by increasing the turnaround space for the fire trucks, that's 900 square feet, but you're restoring 4,000 where the barn is coming down and the gravel driveway is.
I mean, that's a rough number. Yeah. I mean, it's in the thousands for sure. I didn't get into it. I just very quickly took it off and, the driveway about where I thought the driveway was, but it's certainly more than 900.
But what is that space becoming?
Basically, we're creating it as sludge storage, so it's going to be reverted to nature. It'll be just vegetated.
Got it. That's what I needed. Thank you.
Yep.
Commission members, anything? All right, we're getting, Nadine, your hand is still up. I'm trying to make sure that I get through everybody, but we just don't prolong this too long. Because I think we're coming up close to a vote on this matter. And I just want to make sure that we've got a complete record. Bod, you've spoken, iPhone, I don't know who that is. It may be Gene Irwin. Dan O'Neill, you spoke, but your hand is still up. Nadine, you spoke, but your hand is still up.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I can't put my hand down. So I'm sorry.
Okay. You're like me. Okay. Thanks.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Gene, are you taking your hand down, or did you want to say something else?
Yeah, just very briefly. When I was talking about the trees, I wasn't talking about the money going back to the town for new trees. I was talking about how much those trees drink and how much water they evaporate.
Oh,
And
no,
I
I knew
Yeah.
that. You just
Okay.
triggered a different thought. I knew exactly what you were saying, and I do appreciate that.
And my second point briefly, and thank you, John, for this opportunity. My second point briefly is if the water level rises in the wetland across the street from my house, I think most people know where I am, right there on Highland Street. If that water level rises, doesn't that in fact change the 25-foot setback? When that water level
No,
rises.
wetlands are defined differently than water. There's a very specific definition of what a wetland is, and it's not the same thing as water.
Okay.
I mean, you could have water there for a day or two, and then it disappears. That doesn't make it a wetland.
Alrighty. And then I was going to say is to Sean's point, I understand, water moves slowly, but over the course of a year, water can move quite a distance. And I'm thinking after this building, if it's ever built, over the course of a year, I expect my neighbors on Spafford Road heading down towards Reedsdale to get a lot more water because simply the groundwater table is going to rise. I don't believe it's going to go over the street or anything like that, But if it rises from where it is currently now, 6 or 8 inches, that's a mountain of water. Granted, it's going to take a while, but they're going to get it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Gene. All right, commission members. I forget what number of hearings we've had on this, but quite a number. I think we've got the data that we asked for. We did get the hydrology expert to weigh in on this and to answer some of the questions that we had. We did have his response to Scott Horsley's very articulate opinions that have been quoted several times tonight. My only concern is that I want to make sure that we're very specific, and I'm afraid that the motion might be painting with a broad brush rather than a specific one. But we've heard a number of conditions, like Ingrid, you mentioned the calcium chloride as being the most friendly. And we do have a snow plan, but I'd like to have us require that there be an adequate removal plan, that if it gets to a certain volume, that there is a place and a mechanism by which the snow would be removed from the site. Because even with the environmentally friendly calcium chloride, we don't want that next to the wetlands. We want to keep it as far away as possible. And I think that's been addressed, but I just want to make sure that we have that as a particular question. So I think if there is going to be a motion tonight, it's going to have to be by necessity somewhat general, to be in written form, submitted back to, we can vote on it if it's deemed appropriate tonight. But I just want to make sure that we're all in agreement with how it's actually written up, so that there's no translation or mistranslation between what we're voting for and what's actually produced in written form. Because I know that our order in this case is going to be scrutinized very carefully. But with that said, is there a consensus that we can move forward towards a motion to issue an order or not issue an order? I think we've got enough information to go forward, but Wendy and Ingrid and Tom, I'd be interested in your view as well.
So John, I seem to, the fellow that spoke with the Boston Red Sox hat, what I understood from him, it seems unclear to me as to whether the latest Scott Horsley submission was actually made of record and presented to us. You thought there was, and I thought his message was that he thought it was not. So I guess that's still a question outstanding in my mind.
Don, I could just point out,
I think it's a reply. I think I thought that what Dan was saying is that there was a brief, and then there was an opposition brief, and then there was a reply, and perhaps he's looking for a reply. Because I know that at our last meeting we did have something from Scott Horsley, and that's what Sean Reardon was replying to. If Dan is, and I think I asked Dan, do you expect him to file another response, like a reply brief?
And
Excuse me, Irwin,
yes.
if I may interrupt.
We're
excuse me.
expecting.
No,
Scott.
you can't yet, Gene.
I spoke to Scott, and he is planning on doing it. I spoke to him a couple of weeks ago. He was planning. If you remember in the last meeting, in response to Sean, he had said he had done modeling and further analysis, and his computer at the time couldn't pull it up. But he was certainly planning on coming back to you folks with more information, if that refreshes your memory.
Absolutely, he is planning to submit a full modeling analysis of the hydrological impacts. I think that's what Mr. O'Neill, my neighbor, was asking, that you please take that into consideration, given how big of a project this is in this small neighborhood, that it's really worthwhile having a complete picture. And I think you all respect Scott's credentials, his expertise. So I think that's what Dan O'Neill, you were requesting, right?
Yes, that's exactly what I was requesting. You can call me Boston Dan if you want. I appreciate it.
John, if I
All right,
may,
Boston Dan.
John, if I may, I would object to that. I had very clear discussions with Dan Hill a month ago when we met with the planning board, and with the notion of withdrawing the application with the planning board without prejudice. Dan knew then and knows now that we were continuing to go forward with the Conservation Commission. This commission meets once a month. We knew that. It was, that was 5 weeks ago when we met at the last hearing, and Scott has 5 weeks to produce something additional to what he was testifying to that night. He hasn't produced anything. We haven't seen anything from Mr. Hill. We haven't seen anything from Mr. Horsley. To now continue this further for a response brief.
Well, without due respect to.
Right, Ned hasn't finished yet. Dan, just hold off, please.
Yeah, I apologize.
So, as an officer of the court, I'm telling you my conversations with Dan Hill. And it was very clear that this proceeding was continuing to move forward, and that tonight was the next night. And when that matter was continued on August 8th, it was very clear that the purpose of continuing it to tonight was so that Mr. Reardon could take his oral comments and put them in writing, and that you also requested that he respond to the comments made by Mr. Horsley. Those comments, those materials were submitted to the commission on August 31. You forwarded them to me, and I forwarded them directly to the neighborhood and to the 3 lawyers on the other side 5 minutes after I got it. That was over 2 weeks ago.
I understand, and the recitation of the dates of forwarding data is correct. Dan, go ahead. You had something to say, I know.
I'm sorry to question the integrity of an attorney here, but I just wanted to let everybody know here that
I think you're
probably
frozen.
within
Oh, there you are. Okay, gotcha.
we probably weren't even embarking back me up on this, that the neighborhood didn't get any notification in regards to the withdrawal of the application before the planning board, probably about a half an hour before the planning board meeting started. So if we're going to go tit for tat and question people's integrity and about officers of the court, I'm going to tell you about respecting the neighborhood and the people that live here too. We have a say on this. And so we have all retained a counsel here. There may have been some miscommunication here. If it's delayed another month, Mr. Corcoran, then so be it. You do not have to live in this neighborhood, but we do, okay? So we want to make sure that we are represented correctly through our attorney. If there's a miscommunication that was performed through whatever means, I'm here to respectfully request that if you're going to drop a $50 million facility in our backyard, that we have our expert hydrologist counterpoint any discussions that were made here to sway this board. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
If I may just build one comment on what my neighbor Dan said.
You can, but let me interject first.
I'll make it.
I haven't
quick,
heard
yes.
anybody question anybody's integrity. That hasn't happened. So I think everybody's on the side of the angels here. So go ahead, Nadine, but I haven't heard any personal attacks or anybody question anybody's integrity.
I hope it stays that way. How many times I've heard the Northbridge people and Mr. Corcoran use the claim that they really want to be good neighbors. I could not count. I could not tell you how many times I've heard that. I understand it's frustrating to not get what you want when you want it, but we're all grown-ups here. And if right reason, thought prevails and says that we should take a little bit more time to properly do all of our due diligence, left, right, center, let's go ahead and consider that strongly, particularly when, once again, more buildings in this town that go up do not come back down. Once this goes in, it's not coming out in my lifetime, probably not my children's lifetime, God willing, beyond them as well. I think you can handle another month. I know I'd love more than a month, but that's, more opinion than anything else, because I think it goes without saying I'd rather see it not happen at all. But I do think it would be especially considerate to us, because you could imagine that the coalition, as Dan calls it, we've collaborated, we've shared funds. We do not have the same out-of-pocket money to spend on this as, you know, a large corporation does, Vita, Northbridge, et cetera, whatever the people are who are doing it. I think that the money that we're investing in trying to minimize the impact in any way, shape, or form that we can as residents of Milton, it's going to go. I really would appreciate if we were given the chance to let every penny of that, you know, kind of walk and talk. And if that's Horsley, if that's the attorney Dan Hill, we appreciate your consideration on that.
Thank you, Nadine, very, very much.
Thank you.
Commission members, I'll speak out loud on this one. I'd like to see if there's a consensus here. I believe that first, I believe we have sufficient data. Second, if there's a SIR reply coming, then there may be a SIR reply to the SIR reply. It can go on forever. Having said that, I understand, Ingrid, you were concerned that if Scott was going to submit something else, that it might be worthwhile waiting for that one. The difficulty we've got here is that, and the public, members of the public will hear me say it, not all the time, but most of the time, with the assent of the applicant, we will continue this to such and such a date. There's a reason for that. That if the applicant doesn't assent to it after we have sufficient data to make a decision, then we only have 21 days left. So because if we don't do something within the 21 days, if we lack the applicant's assent to the continuance, then the permit's automatically issued. That's the law. So we'll have to do, if we needed more information, and as members of the public and certainly the commission knows, we've actually denied 2 permits within the last year because the applicant failed to give us sufficient information, and that by itself is grounds to deny a permit. So we've got, you know, technical issues on both sides here. So that's why I'm asking the commission members what their view is, because I feel we have sufficient data right now to take this to a vote. But I'd like to hear your position on that as well. Wendy, I'm sorry, Ingrid, you were the one that had mentioned Scott in the first place. And I had recalled that Scott did submit some data before. And I acknowledge he did say that, you know, you could do more modeling.
Yes, and I just, you know, I lost track of what was exactly submitted, and I just was reiterating what the you know, the abutter had mentioned. Like I say, I can't be 100% sure. I mean, I trust you if you say that we have everything that we were supposed to get. I just got the impression that we were missing something, but I could be wrong.
All right. Well, the issue is this, that you know, unless we issue a direct order that we need more information, then we have to ask the permission of the applicant to continue for 30 days, because otherwise the order will issue automatically if it's done with the objection of the applicant within 21 days. Now, there's another alternative. We could have another meeting. But that's why I'm asking you. This is all cards on the table, folks, so that everybody knows what's going on. So I can only reiterate, I think we've got enough to vote on, but Wendy, it's gonna, you know, come down to if you're comfortable voting on this now. Tom Palmer, you have to weigh in on this and tell me if you're comfortable voting on it or not.
I would just like to comment on what Ms. Hannah said about the neighborhood being transformed by this project, by the removal of dense forest with many large trees replaced by a large building. It's absolutely correct. The area is going to be transformed. It's going to be nothing like it was. In the same way, the area where the hospital was built probably looked a lot different at one time. And I am sympathetic to the feeling that what's being lost is valuable. But on the other hand, we have lines we have to operate within. And I think the proponents here have been responsive to the issues we have raised and modify the project to make it better in terms of wetlands impacts. So I guess I would say I am not looking for more information. I don't disagree with what Mr. Horsley said in terms of maybe the wetland line creeping upslope a little bit after the project because of differences in groundwater. I don't disagree with him there, but I don't think the changes are really going to have large impacts. My personal opinion, I have some knowledge of how wetlands work and how they're wetter in the spring and drier in the summer. And it is true that wetlands are often fed by groundwater, and the groundwater emerges from the soil into the wetland. And if it emerges at a slightly different level after this project, well, that will be a change. And supposedly we're not supposed to allow any changes without mitigating. But I think it's a sort of change that is minor enough and hard enough to describe that in the terms of the overall project, it's not a major impact. So that's why I say that I would agree with you, John, that it is ripe to vote.
All right, anything from Wendy, Ingrid? Are you prepared to vote is what I'm saying?
Yes, no, I've heard everything that everyone said and yes.
All right. Well, I would, with a caveat that I'll give up front, that this is going to have to be in writing so that it's very specific and very precise, because we're dealing with some scientific principles here in terms of including calcium chloride as opposed to other ice melts and where it's stored and what volume it's carted off of the site so that we don't leave too much, 10-foot piles of snow that may have some kind of a chemical in it. So we'll have to be very precise on the O&M plan. But I would offer a motion to issue an order of conditions and we're going to have to go slowly on this, that includes the changes that we've seen and the most recent filings and plans that we've submitted, that they included. I'm going to have to ask you for the conditions, but one is, the tree count that we've received and the application of our performance standard to either replace the trees in kind or to replace those trees with a financial contribution to the Conservation Commission. With respect to the snow removal, I just talked about that. So we'll include the MSDS for the calcium chloride to ensure that only the safer chemicals are used. With respect to the invasive species, that I think that's already in the plan, but as Tom suggested, that the limit of work be expanded to include that removal of the invasive species along Highland Street. And for the public's benefit, we obviously have some construction concerns here, and it's not just storage and refueling overnight within our jurisdiction, but it goes far beyond that, because with trucks going in and out of the over Highland Street, we're going to have some cleanliness issues, because the dirt can be tracked and the gravel can be tracked out onto Highland Street. So we're going to have a construction plan that has very, very specific mechanisms to clean the trucks that are going in and out. There will have to be some time constraints as to when the trucks are traveling on Highland Street, so as to not disturb the neighborhood. So I put that under the construction plan area, and I know there's one existing, but that's what I'm saying is it's going to be very specific. There will be pre-construction meetings with Steve Ivas before construction begins, and periodically throughout that time period, there will be. Steve, what would you suggest in terms of reporting? Should we look for a monthly report or something less frequent? Once the
No,
construction
monthly
begins.
report.
What's
A
that?
monthly report would be great. Yes. I agree. Monthly. Monthly written report with photos and paragraphs on the back of each one. Just kidding.
All right. All right. Help me out with additional conditions.
I think you could add to that, that we would provide a look-ahead schedule with those reports.
Yes.
And an acknowledgement that the extra space required by the fire department, which does impact into the non-disturbance zone, will be remediated, not replicated, but remediated by inclusion of the area surrounding the current barn. So that would be returned to a natural state, albeit used as a detention area as well. Because that will require a second vote under the town bylaw. Anything else, Tom? Obviously, we'll have our standard erosion controls, et cetera, but that they're already in the plans.
Mr. Chair, I thought you had mentioned about requirement for invasives removal plan.
Yes, that was I think I had that as number 3, and that the invasive species removal will include new plans showing a revised a limit of work.
Limit of work, right?
All right,
I
Steve.
hope that, you know, as this project goes forward, as I think it will become more evident as time goes on, what is the best way to integrate it with the neighborhood. And in the wintertime at Highland Street, because you are looking across a wetland where no trees will grow, this building is going to be very visible. So it might be possible to screen it better with plantings along Highland Street of trees that will grow up big enough to screen the building. Now, no such trees are on the plan, but I think as we go forward.
I don't fucking know. Ask Sharon Rich.
Excuse me,
The building next to the house.
I'm hearing somebody else.
Yeah, can you mute, please? All I can see is Mr. Beckett. Thank you.
Yeah, so all I'm saying is it's going to be vital to screen the project in the neighborhood, to have the right things growing on the shoulder of the road. And I think it's not going to be very clear what will be possible until some work is done. So all I'm saying is that I hope there will be cooperation between the developers and the neighborhood going forward.
Well, Tom, why don't we make it part of the, I mean, that's a good idea. And I'm sure the developers will say, yes, of course. But why don't we make it as a condition that there shall be, you know, additional screening along Highland Street?
That's acceptable. In fact, we do have landscape plans showing that as part of the planning board submissions. We didn't submit specifically with respect to the Conservation Commission. But there will be a landscape plan that will include screening along Highland Street that will be reviewed and hopefully approved by the planning board. And we can
Well,
set-
that's a little bit of an issue because that work will probably be in our jurisdiction. So,
And I'm
will you
happy
be
to come
coming
back to
back?
the board. I'm happy to come back to the commission for review of those plans as they become more robust.
All right.
Steve, we've discussed a lot of points tonight. Am I missing anything?
Not that I can think of, John. We've got the standard stuff, of course. There's a whole boilerplate, as you know, Ned.
Right.
Right.
I think the last one that we just talked about is very important. And we have to write that properly and correctly, that the applicant will come back to the Conservation Commission once construction has started to review the planting plan for screening. That's all. And you may want some screening on the other side as well, next to the parking lot, next to MRE, the west side. Have you planned that, Ned and Paul?
No,
I
it's-
believe that there is in back of the parking area. I thought you did have screening
Yes.
plans for that.
There's a pretty substantive remaining woodland in the back of that parking lot between that and the MRE property line. We're proposing to leave that untouched.
Okay.
Wendy,
It may be an opportunity, to reduce the amount of money that we have to pay into the tree fund by planting some additional trees back there, and it's certainly something we would look at.
We do have some
Yes.
trees planted between the parking and the remaining buffer. I'm looking at the landscape plan
Yeah.
now, so there are some being proposed there.
there are.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay. Thank you, Paul.
Wendy, Ingrid, any additional conditions that you can think of that we've missed?
None here. I can't think of anything else.
All right.
I think that covers it, John.
All right. Well, therein is the motion. Is there a second for it?
I'll second that.
All right. Thanks, Tom. Any discussion among commission members? Hearing none. Wendy, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ingrid, how do you vote?
Aye.
Tom, how do you vote?
Aye.
And I, John Kiernan, vote aye as well. So that's unanimous order of conditions. And that will take some time to write, but we'll try to get it done this week. All right,
And John, who made that motion?
I did.
Okay.
And do you need a second vote relative to the
Yes, we do.
undisturbed?
Right. And thanks, Ned. The second vote is under the section 15 of the bylaw. That if there is a section of the non-disturbed zone that's taken as part of the plan, we have to have a vote that would be, it would not be a significant adverse impact upon the resources that we protect. And that would include as part of that, the remediation plan that Paul had discussed. So I would again propose a motion to approve the plan in accordance with the bylaw on the basis that it would not be a significant adverse impact on the resource that we protect, in light of the fact that there is a remediation plan that exceeds the amount taken at the suggestion of the fire chief. That's the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thanks, Tom. Any discussion? Hearing none. Wendy, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ingrid, how do you vote?
Aye.
Tom, how do you vote?
Aye.
And I, John Kiernan, vote aye as well. So that's unanimous. So there's an order of conditions in existence. We'll try to get it written by the end of the week. And distribute it. It will be available at the DPW if you can contact Philip Driscoll at DPW, and you can get a copy of that order. All right, thank you very much, folks, for your time and attention.
Thank you.
All right, and
Good night.
next,
Thank you.
good night, thank you. Next on the agenda is 7 and 8, which is 25 Guile Road, Lower Field.
John, if I could interrupt you, there's a message on the chat saying that there are people in the waiting room.
Can you spot
thank
them,
you.
Steve?
Yes, I've admitted them all.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, thanks, Wendy, for spotting that. So this is 7 and 8. This is 25 Guile Road, grass for Guile. They're combined. This is the artificial turf field. And I think we should probably begin by getting folks up to speed. I think we talked at the June meeting that it was unlikely that even issuing the permit at that time that would result in a field being installed by the fall season. In July, we're very specific in saying that it would not. In August, we repeated that, we confirmed the fact that even if issued at that time, there would be no field for this fall. So it really looks like, if issued, it would be for the spring season. Having said all that, we have been moving forward with a contract we put out for a hydrologist and for an environmental chemist to answer a myriad questions. There are actually 10 components of the scope of work, and that went out to 5 recipients. Only one of them responded, and that was Tetra Tech, and they came back with a proposal and a proposed contract. That contract was submitted to town council. There has been a little bit of a slowdown because lots of reasons, but one of them, we changed town council, not the firm, but Kevin Freitag has left the employ of Murphy, Hess, Lehane, and Toomey, and Peter Mello is now the designated town council from that firm. I've been able to work with Peter Mello and with his colleague, Cliff Rhodes, who is a contract expert. There have been some discussions back and forth between Sean Reardon at Tetra Tech and town council. I think, to my knowledge, everything has been resolved. I talked to Nick Milano today, whose signature is required on that contract to approve the contract with Tetra Tech to answer the questions that we've asked. Although there are 10 areas or components to the scope of work, they really break down into 2 component parts, big component parts. One is the temperature of the water getting dumped into Pine Tree Brook, which in turn feeds the Neponset River, where there's a cold water fishery. So we are concerned with temperature. That's one area. The other area is whether or not we're adding to the contaminant load. That is there a net increase in the contaminant load to the waters from the runoff from the field? Those are the 2 big areas. There are certain subparts to those, but that's part of the contract. The contract has been agreed to. There was a select board meeting tonight, but I talked to Nick and he said it does not have to be approved because of the cost. I think the cost is Sean, you can help me out. I think it's 11,000 or close to that, but it does not require a full vote of the select board. So Nick is ready to go, and I think that Cliff Rhodes will have the contract. It should be signed, if not tomorrow, then this week. So that's a long-winded way of saying that we don't have any substantive developments today, but I know that some people may want to be heard, and as a consequence, I did alert Kevin Chisholm from the Parks Department, and I did alert Chris Huntress. I'm looking for you. I think you're here, and just said that you should be on because it is on the agenda. It's a public meeting, and I want to make sure that we respond to questions, comments, etc. But at this stage, we, the Conservation Commission, do not have any substantive report, although we've taken the next step. We've got the scope of work, we've got the contract. And Sean, you might be able to tell us how soon can you get us data? Is Sean still on? I can't tell.
John, I don't see him.
I don't see him.
He may have left. Well, I had talked to him before, and that the contract is essentially complete. So it will certainly be prior to the next meeting. And I'll ensure that it is in sufficient time that both the Conservation Commission can view the findings and recommendations of Tetra Tech and the public can as well. Chris Huntress, do you have any comments in terms of how fast you think this can get moved along?
Mr. Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, good. Well, thanks for having us on tonight. I was aware of much of what you have discussed already with regard to the contract, and we'll wait for the Tetra Tech review and result. Let me know if we can help in any way. But as I told you last week, I didn't expect to present anything tonight, but happy to answer any questions as we can.
All right. And in full disclosure, some of the discussions that I've had with some of the entities that we sent this request for proposal out to 5 different entities. And I said, if in fact you find out that there is a net increase in the contaminant load to either the water or the soil, is there a way to get it out? Is there a way to filter out any contaminants? And the simple answer is yes. The more complicated answer is, how much is it going to cost? Because I know there are household systems that are relatively cheap to filter out PFAS and PFOS. But this would be a larger quantity of water, and we'd have to measure both volume and rate of flow in order to determine what kind of a filtration system there is. So I've actually put out some requests. I did talk to the town administrator and asked if we can kind of redouble our efforts to find if there are grants available, whether they're EPA grants or DEP grants, state or federal funding, to see whether or not we could get some assistance in the town that if filtration is required, can we afford to install such a filtration system to respond to any, and I don't even know if there is an increase in contaminants, but if there is, the next step would be to consider whether or not we can filter it out. So that's in the works as well. And that will certainly be part of the response from Tetra Tech. So having said that, I asked Chris, I know that Kevin Chrism is here. Kevin, do you have any thoughts on this? I know everybody wants to move this along quickly. I see Kevin, but he's still muted, so he just.
Hi, Mr. Chair. Thank you for having me. This week is a perfect example of why we need this field down there. The amount of the rain we've had that just can't handle a grass field down there. I mean, I know there's a bunch of people on here who want to speak as well to this point. It's so frustrating as a park director to call these the leagues during the week and say, yeah, you can't practice today. Sorry, but it's not safe. It's not only just down at Lower Guile, it's the other fields, because the amount of rain we've had is just astronomical, but especially down Lower Guile. And we just hope this moves forward, and we are waiting patiently. And we thank you for all your help from the commission. Thanks.
All right, thanks. And I don't know if I know there's a neighborhood group. Paul, are you there? I think I've lost you. I saw you before.
I'm here, John.
There you are. Oh, perfect.
Yeah. Well, as a matter of fact, this is a great segue from what Kevin had to say. There are a couple of things that I'd like to point out real quickly. Kevin pointed to the amount of rain that we saw and that we've seen, and we've all seen the footage out of Leominster and various places. And that speaks to, again, things we talked about before about how we're going to see increasing amounts of that kind of precipitation. We're going to see more extreme weather. It's not a matter of when, but that it is in point of fact coming. In fact, it is here, which is why we have to be particularly careful about taking a look at this project and making sure that it won't allow the wetlands to be damaged, that it won't damage either the wetlands or Pine Tree Brook, which, as you know, is a cold water fishery. I have a couple questions. First of all, I wanted to know whether or not we would have an opportunity to actually look at the data and have some of our experts look at the data. I
Yes and
understand.
yes.
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 Okay, that's great. And finally, I wanted to know if we want to ask a little help actually in figuring out the appropriate venue for airing an additional concern we have about the project. We recently confirmed that the field is Article 97 land, and we wanted to know where we could register a challenge to it based on the project based on that. Is the Concom the appropriate venue, or should we be talking to some other regulator?
Well, to my knowledge, the Article 97 issue has to be resolved by the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, EOEEA.
Okay.
There's been a recent change there. We've been dealing for many years with Bob O'Connor, who's recently retired. And Bob, I think it's Morden, is currently the person that is, I don't know if he's the director, he's in charge, but he's the person that we seem to consult with. But that would be EOEEA. There would be Article 97, but I think they only get involved if there's a change in use. And I
Right.
don't know if this would qualify as a change in use, but that would be their call, not the Conservation Commission.
Right. Yeah, we're sort of aware of that. We've been doing a good bit of research, and we're aware that a lot of the language around Article 97 focuses on use, and the arguments focus on use, and that the use here won't change. We spoke to the town planning director about that, but actually our argument doesn't focus on use, because at its heart, Article 97 is about preservation of open public land and natural resources and environmental protection. And we plan to argue that the turf project mean that first of all, the land will no longer be open to all the community, but will be fenced and reserved for use by select town sports teams and contractors or renters. But more importantly, actually, what we're going to argue is the installation of plastic turf will bring about measurable material damage to the natural resource itself, which is the land. It will effectively kill the soil as well as leach various chemicals and toxins into the soil. Anyway, we've run this by the Composite Watershed folks and a few other groups, and they view the argument as somewhat novel. So we were thinking that it would be nice to take it to the next step and see what other people had to say. And we weren't quite clear who we should be taking this to, but the information that you gave us is helpful.
All right, thanks, Paul. Any other questions? I see Mary Firabin.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I'm speaking on behalf of Milton Youth Football and Cheer, but really for all the youth programs in town. The conditions at Lower Guile Field are absolutely atrocious. And speaking on to the comments that were just reported from the previous commenter, I do believe Chris Huntress did say that the water runoff would be better managed than it currently is. But I also want to say that I am extremely disappointed with this committee and their pace. I am asking for a reasonable timeline of review, such as when can we expect the testing to happen? When can we expect these results? When can we expect the committee to review these results? And most importantly, when can we expect you to vote? I'm asking that you be held accountable. Back in August, you were supposed to have already nominated the contractor and have decided that person, and it got delayed again. And I feel like we're in this delay pattern for the last 3 months. And I feel like that's how you started this item number tonight, with a delay from June to July to August. And now again, nothing more novel to report. So I ask that the committee here honor this timeline of this project, as further delays only prove dismal for the success of this project.
I understand and accept what you just said. I accept your criticism. But the simple answer is I don't know, because that's why we hired the hydrologist. That's why we're looking for a chemist, an environmental chemist, because it's beyond the scope of our expertise. and we need the assistance. So those are the people that could answer how long it's going to take. I don't think it's going to take that long because I don't think they have to do new testing. They're not designed to reinvent the wheel. They're trying to figure out that the data that's already been collected, how do we manage the data? How do we analyze it? Because again, if you take a diluted concentration of water running off the field, the turf field, and you add that to a soil concentration, it's not the sum of the two numbers. I have no idea what it is, and that's why we need help. So our job is to figure out whether or not there's a net increase in a contaminant level. If there is, we've got to get rid of it.
And that's a fair
I
explanation. But what I'm asking for is, like you even just said, that we haven't even gotten the final signature to secure this for the contractor to do the second hydrologist testing. So I feel like, we are delaying even signatures throughout this town. We are moving at a ridiculously slow pace to even get you or the people, the hydrology, to actually do the job, to report on those numbers. We haven't even gotten to be able to do the second round of testing because we delayed finding that second hydrologist. Now we still are waiting on, sounds like, one more signature before it's supposed to come tomorrow or maybe the end of this week. And it's just the same story. And we were told back in the spring, it would be a fall project. Now we're being told it's going to be a spring project. And it's just a cycle that I feel like we can't get out of. So I just really want to hold this committee accountable. What is the accountability on your end to actually hold true to getting the signature and moving to the next step to actually get, like you said, get the job done and get the testing done? What is that? How do we hold you accountable for that?
I think you're doing it by asking it at a public meeting. And you have our good faith and our commitment to do so. But again, I can't tell you if the resolution from a scientific perspective is going to be, Tuesday at 2:00 or next Monday. I don't know. I can't be any more responsive than to say you have our good faith and that we will proceed. And it's the town. I mean, we're all on the same side. Everybody here, we've got folks that are, pushing the athletics. We're getting pushed. Other folks that are pushing the health of the youth. Everybody's on the side of the Angels. And nobody benefits from delay. And good Lord, we're certainly not trying to delay this. We've had some unforeseen circumstances in terms of the contract analysis. Perhaps we gave too much time for the 5 parties to respond when only one actually gave us a proposal. But under the municipal bidding law, we have to do that. We really are trying to dot the I's and cross the T's here because we know there are a lot of people that feel very passionately about this. And they're all well-intentioned and good people with good values. And we're trying to reflect that. So please allow us the time to dot the I's and cross the T's in terms of scientific reliability. That's what we're trying to do. And you are holding us accountable just by what you said. Appropriately
thank
so.
Thank you. I look forward to the meeting next month, and hopefully by that point, we'll have an update in terms of testing being done or, a date for testing.
I agree with you. I certainly hope so. Debbie Milbauer, I see your hand raised. Can you unmute and speak?
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you. Hi, thank you so much for recognizing me. I have a couple of points. I'm just going to say quickly all of them. So I appreciate that you only had one respondent to the bid. That one respondent actually has their engineering work with other turf projects actually is in dispute, has been disputed and appealed. There's been a lot of news coverage over their findings, over their expertise. So I appreciate that there's only one engineering firm that responds to the bid, but I'm concerned that the one firm that responded has a track record of their work being in dispute. So that's one point I want to make. The other point I want to make is I just want to remind everybody that the Conservation Commission has said multiple times that your authority is limited to just ruling on the environmental impact. And you can't take into considerations anything outside of that. So I understand, and there's actually a crisis in field shortage. I really appreciate that. I have some great ideas on how to address that, and I'm hoping to take that outside of this context and process. So I really appreciate there's a crisis in fields, but that's outside of the purview of the Conservation Commission because it has to do with the sports programs. And their mandate is very narrow to just environmental impact. So I would say if you're also gonna take into consideration other things in addition to the, if you are gonna consider the urgency of the crisis in sports fields, which we don't dispute, it's absolutely true, then I would say we need to also think about climate change. Turf emits CO2, it's plastic, grass absorbs CO2. So, you know, when we talk about what is in the purview and the authority of the conservation to consider, I would say, I think we need to think broadly about what your authority is and what your role is. So that's one thing. The other thing is my understanding, no PFAS filtration system is possible. If that were true, then it would be everywhere. We're in a crisis with PFAS. My sister-in-law is a water engineer, and she testifies about PFAS in state houses, and she's done research and she's written, and she has told me that you can't filter out PFAS. You just can't. Maybe other toxins, but that is also still very difficult. We just don't have the technology. There's tens of thousands of chemicals that we don't have systems to filter out because they're being manufactured. And so I think it's a lovely idea that we could have filtration. And I hear what's being said is we don't know if there is possible filtration. I appreciate that. But what I'm putting out there is my understanding is that there is no filtration system that can do this, even for millions of dollars. It just can't be done. The EPA recently put out, I think it was the EPA that said that no level of PFAS, no level is safe, none. So filtration system might throw out some, but leave the acceptable level, right? Laws are changing around the acceptable level, but filtration isn't realistic, is my understanding. So I just want to, and then the last thing I want to say is, unrelated to this, I would like to request to get on the agenda for next time, because I'd like to request to have a sign put up in that grassy area at the dead end of Guile Road, right where the bridge over Pine Tree Brook. You go over the bridge, then there's a big grassy area, and then you walk out and there's Guile Field, Lower Guile. Cars park there all the time. We've been saying this for years. 2 days ago, I was out there and I saw a car pull a Yui and mowed over a section of the bushes to pull their Yui. And I don't want to wait until the project has been decided, because regardless of what's going to happen, it's not going to be for, it's not going to be for a while. And I would like you all earlier in the meeting voted on a sign for Blue Hills Parkway for the new conservation land, which is awesome. And I think it would be just as easy to vote on a sign. So, and I would like to talk about it at the next meeting, to talk about what the sign would say and when that would get up and all of that. So I appreciate your patience and thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Deborah. Are there any other members of the public that would like to be heard? Kate, I see you.
Thank you very much. I have a question for, I guess, Mr. Huntress. Have the components of the field been officially identified, the shock pad, the infill, et cetera?
Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to address that.
Yes, if you would, please. Go ahead, Chris. Thank you.
I believe several times, Kate, that we've presented to this commission, we've identified the products. Yes.
Actually, you haven't identified them. You identified potential products, but you have not named
Fair
the
point.
products.
That's a fair
specifically.
point. Under the
And-
Mass General Law, there
and-
are certain requirements for equal products to be considered. So
Yeah,
yes, we cross
I
that.
just,
bridge.
I don't think we can do the testing without knowing what the products are. I just think that's a really important question to ask. Do you agree, Mr. Kiernan?
Yeah, yes, I do. I think a lot of the data has already been collected and submitted as part of the application process.
No, I don't think it has.
If I might be able to help
Have
clear this up.
changed over time. At the March 28th meeting, Mr. Huntress presented several infill possibilities as well as several carpet and I think even a second shock pad. I was just wondering if they've been identified officially because I can't find any verification of that in the files in your office.
We had, make sure I'm not muted. You can hear me, correct?
Yeah, yes, Chris, go ahead.
All right. We had reviewed multiple products, you're correct. We had also identified preferred and recommended products. And under the Mass General laws, there's two ways to procure products. One would be that you identify 3 equal products and you put that out to bid. The other way is that you buy products off a state procurement or bid list that have already been competitively bid, and you can get the products that you want. All of the products that we're recommending, being the woven turf, the organic infill, and the resilient shock pad, are available through that procurement. So yes, we can identify specific products, and yes, they are the products that have already been tested.
And could we make sure that those products are identified and tested again, because the Tetra Tech testing process was in question at the Martha's Vineyard, in the Martha's Vineyard case.
So I'd like to address that if I could. There was a previous comment about that as well. The Tetra Tech testing, and it was Alpha Lab testing, not Tetra Tech. Tetra Tech actually just reviewed the test results. The test results themselves are not in question. They were done by a third-party independent testing lab, not Tetra Tech. It was actually Alpha Labs that did it. It's the overall controversy of turf where we find ourselves having the debate, not the testing of the products or even the levels that were found in the products. Those were not.
Excuse me, sir, I believe it was the laboratory procedure that was in question.
No, it was not. There's only one laboratory procedure that's approved by the EPA.
It was the laboratory testing. We had Dr. Kristen Mello come and talk to us about that early on.
With all due respect, I've been very significantly involved in that project. The testing was not what was in question. It's the interpretation of the results that are in question.
Okay, we're not gonna get much out of that, but is there some way we can see the selected products and the warranties?
I think they're all part of the original submission here. Now, granted, some of that was.
The warranties are not.
Okay, now I'm going to answer your question. Ready?
Okay. Yes.
There was an original submission that identified certain products. There was data that was submitted to us, and yes, it did come from Martha's Vineyard. We are acutely aware of the fact that there was an appeal because there was a split between the Conservation Commission that went one way and the Planning Board that had a split vote and went the other way, and we understand that it's been appealed. But that does not put it under the microscope, the legitimacy of the reporting. It just shows that there are people that have different views as to whether or not the turf field is good or bad. One side appealed it. That doesn't mean that the data is bad. It just means that how they react to what the data results show is. Some people like it, some people don't like it.
That's not accurate.
No, it's not. Would we have the opportunity to have a scientist come back and go over that testing again with you? Because this was discussed.
This is
earlier.
exactly what we're doing.
Okay, all right, so
That's the whole point. And we're being criticized for slowing it down when in fact, we're trying to, as I said, dot every I and cross every T so that we are assured of scientific reliability. That is what we're doing. That's our obligation to the citizens.
okay. Deb, did you want to say something? Because I have another question.
No, finish up, please, because I'll look
So
for
I-
others,
I-
and then we
I
can
would
get back
like-
to Deb if she has more.
Okay, thank you. And I'd like to switch topics here. Have we done the verification of whether grass would work? Because that came up as a question, I think a couple of months ago, and we never got an official answer on that. I was wondering if you could clear that up for us. And if we could see the material on the study that was done about grass, because obviously there's so many people here to talk about how much we need a playing field. So
We've had all kinds of folks testify. We had your expert come in from Martha's Vineyard and tell us and showed us, we all watched jointly at a public meeting, the demonstration of the irrigation system and the fertilization system and the we all watched it together.
I believe we left that meeting with someone saying we were going to look at, I don't remember the name of the company that did some work on the field to tell us whether or not it was possible to use an alternative, which is natural grass. Did we ever get that study that I believe Hans asked about that? And I think this was in May.
I don't know what study you're referring to, but I know that there were questions asked of Kevin Chisholm, and he explained exactly what he's done to irrigate and to fertilize the fields there, and the failure of the ability of the grass to withstand the number of players and the number of games and the number of practices. We've gone over that. And we do have the data.
Could we see that data on the grass fields? Would you make that available?
Absolutely, everything is in the public record. As a matter of fact, after we watched it jointly at a public meeting, somebody submitted it. They gave us the same video back again. I happened to watch it twice, but it's part of our public record. It's there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Deborah?
Yeah, hi, thank you so much. I just want to clarify, I think if I understand Kate correctly, there's two different things you're both talking about. One is talking about how grass is feasible and how it would be maintained. I think Kate's asking you about this grass field, if it were reconstructed, to do a feasibility study for this grass, for this section of land. So I think you're both saying different things. You're talking about information that's been presented about grass in general, and Kate is referring to an actual study of this land, of a feasibility study, which Hans had suggested.
And
so just one thing. The second thing.
Go ahead, I'm going to interrupt.
No, I was going to make another point about something
Go
else.
ahead. Well, my only thought was that Kevin responded to that very question. What has been done with this field? And
Well, actually, John, excuse me, I hate to interrupt you, but actually Kevin promised to give us numbers about what they spent and when they spent it, and those numbers never arrived.
All right, now we're changing again. We're changing again. Okay, now you go to the budget. He told you what he did, and that's what Deborah was bringing up.
No,
I
we
think that's
asked
what
for
Kate was bringing
records on what he did, so we could see what he did. That's what we asked for, and we never
You
got
asked him,
it.
and you asked him, and he told you.
But we didn't see the records, sir.
Okay, records. Well, I'm not sure that Kevin has a chart of what he does on a daily basis, but I think in his position as a representative of the town, he told you what he did. I don't know if you want to cross-examine him on that, but I think we're getting pretty far afield here because we're trying to collect data. So Deborah, please make your next point.
Thank you so much. So also just to say, we're trying to collect data also, that field is structurally deficient. And so our town has put buckets of money, thousands and thousands of dollars over the years, as Kevin told everybody, and says, oh, it doesn't work. We've done everything we can. It's structurally, it needs to be reconstructed. So we're asking for the budget. We want to know how much has been put in to understand expenditures. So we're looking for data too, because potentially it's actually more over the long run. Anyway, the point is I think that when we're asking for data, we're also collecting information, and for him to say, oh, we did a lot of stuff, which you did, and you've worked very hard over the years to try and get that field up to par, but it's structurally deficient. No matter how much you dump into the grass, it's not ever going to grow properly because it needs to be reconstructed, which is why this whole project came to be. So that's one thing. The thing I wanted to point out, about Chris. Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate that you clarified what the debate was previously in terms of Martha's Vineyard. You said that there was another company that did the testing, and that the testing results were not in question. What was in question, you said, is Tetra Tech's analysis. And that was my original point, which is their analysis has been in question in previous projects. And so I'm concerned that you would hire a firm that has a track record of their analysis being questioned. And I think, and I know they're the only one out of the 5 that responded, but I think we need to think about, are we just going to go with the only one because they were the only one, when there's a track record of public, it's been in the newspapers, debate around their analysis, their interpretation. So that's what I was trying to say before, and I just wanted to clarify. And I would like for you to respond and tell me what you think about hiring a firm that has a track record of their analysis being brought in question.
I have been a lawyer for a very long time in a litigation firm. I'm a trial lawyer. What I do for a living is get involved in disputes. It happens constantly. The fact that somebody disagrees with an expert doesn't mean the expert's opinion is no good. It means somebody disagrees with the conclusion. That's my entire life. And if we were to throw out every expert that is, whose findings are disputed, there wouldn't be any. That's what experts do. They disagree with each other. And the idea is to try to find reliable scientific data and make our judgment based upon that. And we need help in this area. We need help in terms of environmental chemistry.
So I appreciate your expertise, and what I'm saying is their analysis scientifically was brought into question. It's not an opinion, like we want this, we want that. There was a scientific basis for their analysis to be questioned, and I think it's biased to hire a firm whose scientific analysis is not opinion. There's a scientific analysis.
All right, understood. You've made your point. Thank you.
Researchers. So I appreciate you acknowledging it's not just an opinion, it's a scientific.
Thank you. All right, I see no other. No, I haven't looked, and Steve, you can help me. I don't see any other hands. I think we've completed our discussion for this, because there's really nothing before us today. This is just sort of public speak, which I appreciate.
John?
Yes, Steve.
Liz O'Rourke has a hand up.
Don't see her.
Yep. She's there.
All right, I don't see her, but go ahead, Liz.
Hi, I just wanted to just make a comment about you have put out to bid for 5 contractors. I just want to say that if I were having some work done in my house and I contacted 5 contractors to come and look at my house to do some work, and only one got back to me, I would certainly try harder to get some other contractors to I wouldn't just go with the one just because they're the only one who got back to me. I want to, why did the other 4 not get back to you? I mean, to me, very odd.
They did get back to us and they
Okay,
declined it because
that's-
they said they don't have the expertise to do our pretty extensive scope of work. So
So
they
that means-
did that, just to be clear, there's a
Okay.
record. The record
Okay,
is,
I didn't
get back
know
to
that.
us.
I didn't know that, but if that's the case, then maybe you need to expand your search. If you only have one person that you contacted who has the expertise, maybe you need to expand the search. All I'm saying. I mean, I would do that as a homeowner if I was looking for people and I wanted to get the best.
I don't know, we've been called to task for taking too much time already by going to 5 people.
Well, you know, sometimes things that are really important take time.
Oh, yes, indeed. And we're trying to do the right thing, ma'am.
I
We really are.
understand you are. We really understand that you are doing the right thing and we appreciate it. We really do.
Thank you.
So sorry if I sound negative. I'm just saying that I'm not trying to stall the process. I'm trying to make the process as good as it can be. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. All right. We have nothing substantive before us today. We have to await the next meeting to get a response from Tetra Tech. So we will continue this at with the assent of the applicant, the town, to the next meeting, which takes us to 9 and 10 have already been continued. 11 is the approval of the minutes. I'm not sure, I'm not in a position to do August 8th or 26th. So I defer that to the next meeting. Additional business. Steve, do you have anything for additional business?
I do not, John.
Commission members, Tom, anything for additional business?
No.
Wendy,
No, thank you, John.
Ingrid, anything?
Nothing here.
All right, so we have a site visit on the 30th at 8:30 at 57 Hurlcroft. I think that's our only visit, so that should be a short public meeting. And Steve, what is the date of the October meeting?
The October meeting is 10 October.
10 October. All right, and Paul, for your benefit, as soon as we get data from Tetra Tech, it will be given to Phil Driscoll. And so I'd suggest to everybody that's interested in it to check in with Phil periodically. I don't know when it's going to be submitted to us. I'll try to give you a heads up, but I can't give everybody a heads up because I'm not sure how to contact everybody here. But if I can sort of, if I can look to you as kind of being the leader of the neighborhood group, and I don't mean to short Debbie, I'll try to get it to Deb Milbauer as well. But it's just that as soon as we get it, it will become public information. So it'll be with Phil Driscoll at the DPW yard.
Great, John. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks all. Well, since we have no additional business, I think that's it. Are we ready to adjourn? Yes. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right. Thanks, Tom. Wendy, you're going to second that?
Yes, I do.
All right. Thanks. No discussion. All in favor? Aye. We're in
Aye.
adjournment. Thank you very much, folks. Good night.